A mountain sleeps for 6 long centuries in the green highlands of the Philippines, and almost no one recalls its true nature. On its gentle slopes, farmers plant their rice, children walk to distant schools, and forests grow thick above a hidden fire. Beneath that quiet surface waits a chamber of molten stone, patient and immense, holding a power the world has long forgotten. For generations, the mountain gives only shade and rain and rich dark soil, and no elder speaks of the danger buried below. Then, in the summer of 1991, the sleeping giant begins to stir, and the sky above the islands is about to change forever. Journalists race down winding mountain roads as a towering wall of ash surges behind them, faster than their vehicles can flee. The cloud sweeps forward at over 100 kilometers each hour, swallowing the daylight and turning afternoon into midnight. Ash rains upon their windshields, the horizon vanishes, and for a moment it seems the whole world has been set loose at once. Behind that racing wall, a mountain is tearing itself apart, and the plains below wait helpless beneath a sky turned to stone. The energy unleashed will rival the force of hundreds of atomic bombs. Yet this is no weapon, only the raw power of the earth. What the official history often forgets is the quieter story, the long months of warnings, doubt, and science that came before. How does a nation prepare for a disaster it has never seen, guided only by numbers, instinct, and a few borrowed weeks of time? Who dares to order hundreds of thousands from their homes on the word of a mountain that has slept longer than any nation nearby? The answer lies in a desperate race against a volcano, where every choice means the difference between survival and terrible loss. This is the story of Mount Pinatubo and of the people who learned to read the language of a volcano waking from its long sleep. To understand what unfolds, we must first travel to the Philippines, an archipelago of more than 7,000 scattered islands. These islands rest upon the Pacific Ring of Fire, the vast arc where the restless plates of the earth forever collide and grind. Here, one great slab of ocean floor slides slowly beneath another, melting far below and feeding the volcanoes that rise above. This hidden engine has shaped the islands for millions of years, building mountains, carving valleys, and birthing fertile soil. The same fire that threatens the land has also blessed it, for volcanic ash makes the fields around Pinatubo rich and green. Rice terraces climb the lower slopes, sugarcane sways across the plains, and the monsoon rains feed a landscape of deep abundance. Pinatubo stands quietly among these green ridges, its last great eruption lost to memory more than 5 long centuries ago. So gentle does it seem that few even think of it as a volcano, and its very name has faded from the warnings of the elders. Its slopes are cloaked in dense rainforest, its rivers run clear, and its summit gathers clouds like an ordinary mountain peak. Around its base live tens of thousands of people, including the Aita, an indigenous community rooted in these green highlands. For generations, the Aita farm the slopes, hunt the forests, and honor the mountain as a guardian rather than a looming threat. Their lives are woven into its rhythms, their villages scattered beneath its canopy, their history bound to its ancient stones. Nearby sprawls Clark Air Base, at the time one of the largest American military installations found anywhere in the entire world. Thousands of soldiers and their families live in its shadow, alongside the cities and towns that have grown across the plain. Markets bustle, jeepneys crowd the roads, and church bells ring across a region that has never once feared the mountain above. Season follows season without alarm, the dry months yielding to monsoon rains, and the peak keeping its patient watch. Traders carry rice and sugar to distant ports, and the wealth of the volcanic plain flows outward across the whole region. No one imagines that the very ground of their prosperity could one day rise against them in fire, ash, and falling stone. The mountain is a fixture of every horizon, a familiar shape against the dawn, as permanent in their minds as the sea itself. Children grow up beneath it, elders grow old before it, and no one alive has ever seen it as anything but silent and green. Generations are born and buried in its shadow, and the volcano is woven into the songs, prayers, and names of the whole land. Life here follows the familiar rhythms of farming, family, and faith, with the mountain seen as a protector of the land below. No modern instrument watches over Pinatubo, for no one truly believes this gentle green peak could ever endanger the region. And so the mountain keeps its ancient secret, hidden beneath the forests, waiting for the moment when it will speak once more. Then, in the early days of April in 1991, the mountain finally breaks its long silence with a sound no living soul has heard. Steam bursts violently from its flanks, and a line of small explosions scars the upper slopes where the forest once stood whole. The ground trembles beneath the villages, and a strange, sulfurous smell drifts down through the valleys on the morning air. Startled birds scatter, dogs bark at nothing, and the people look toward the peak with a fear they cannot yet put into words. At first, the officials hesitate, for a smoking mountain is not proof of disaster, and panic itself can bring its own harm. But the tremors do not fade, the steam does not settle, and soon it becomes clear that this is no passing disturbance. Local nuns, alarmed by the tremors and the rising columns of vapor, carry the troubling news downward and sound the first alarm. Their warning reaches PHIVOLCS, the Philippine agency charged with watching over the nation's many restless volcanoes. The scientists face an immediate and daunting problem, for Pinatubo has no seismographs, no records, and almost no history at all. They must begin from nothing, studying a mountain that has kept its deepest secrets hidden for longer than anyone can remember. Every clue must be gathered by hand, every measurement fought for, as the clock quietly begins to count down toward disaster. There are no maps of its past, no charts of its moods, only a forested peak and a growing sense that time is running short. Teams climb the steep slopes and place their seismographs across the terrain, listening for the heartbeat buried far underground. Almost at once, the instruments record hundreds of small earthquakes each day, a clear sign that magma is moving deep below. These early tremors mark a phreatic phase in which rising heat meets groundwater and drives sudden, violent bursts of steam. The pattern is unmistakable, and the scientists soon realize they are watching the awakening of something far larger than feared. Every reading deepens their worry, for the signs all point toward a mountain gathering strength for a far greater release. They work through sleepless nights, plotting each quake by hand, watching the epicenters creep closer and closer to the summit. The earthquakes cluster in swarms, then scatter, then return, each shift a clue to the hidden movement of the molten rock. Slowly, a picture emerges from the noise. A portrait of magma rising along deep fractures toward the surface far above. The scientists learn to read this restless code, translating the trembling of the earth into a forecast of what may come. Round the clock they trade shifts, some watching the drums of the seismographs, others plotting the swelling of the peak. Exhaustion sets in, the coffee grows cold, and still the work continues. For the mountain grants no rest to those who watch. Recognizing the true scale of the threat, the Philippine team calls for help from experts across the ocean in the United States. Volcanologists from the United States Geological Survey soon arrive, carrying instruments, hard-won experience, and grave lessons. Together, the two teams form a single mission, uniting local knowledge with global science against a common and rising danger. Language and distance fall away before the shared urgency, for the mountain speaks a tongue that every scientist can understand. In the final week of April, a base of operations rises within the perimeter of the American Air Base at the foot of the peak. From this outpost, the joint team begins the urgent work of measuring, mapping, and forecasting a volcano they barely understand. Day and night, the scientists watch their screens, tracing every tremor, every plume, every subtle shift within the mountain. To learn Pinatubo's distant past, they gather ancient deposits and send them for radiocarbon dating in far-off laboratories. The results prove sobering, revealing a long history of tremendous eruptions, separated by centuries of deceptive, quiet calm. Each past outburst buries the surrounding valleys beneath vast blankets of ash, pumice, and swift ground-hugging debris. Layer upon layer tells the same story of a mountain that wakes rarely but wakes with a fury few places on Earth can match. Charcoal buried in old ash yields dates stretching back thousands of years, marking eruption after eruption across the ages. The last great blast, they find, came roughly 5 centuries before, long enough for every memory of danger to fade away. History, written in ash and stone, warns them plainly that Pinatubo is not the gentle mountain the living believe it to be. The evidence points toward an explosivity index of 6, placing Pinatubo among the most powerful eruptions the Earth can produce. Such eruptions are rare across a human lifetime, yet the deposits make plain that this mountain has done it many times before. The scientists now understand they are not facing a small event, but a giant, one capable of reshaping an entire region. Beneath the summit, the scientists estimate a magma chamber holding between 40 and 90 cubic kilometers of molten rock. The scale defies easy comprehension, for such a volume could reshape the entire landscape and darken the skies across the globe. To imagine it, one must picture whole valleys filled to the brim with molten stone, waiting for a single crack to set it free. Around that hidden reservoir lie cities, farms, and bases, a dense and unsuspecting population living atop a sleeping furnace. The scientists count the towns, the roads, the bridges, and measure how little time remains to move so many out of harm. More than 500,000 people live within reach of the danger, most of them unaware of the force gathering beneath their feet. The question is no longer whether Pinatubo will erupt, but when, and whether so many can possibly be moved to safety in time. Every day of study becomes a day stolen back from disaster, as the team races to turn cold data into life-saving decisions. The weight of that responsibility settles upon them, for a single wrong call could cost thousands of lives across the plain. To track the rising magma, brave pilots fly their helicopters through the fumes to measure the sulfur dioxide leaving the summit. Rising gas levels reveal that fresh magma is climbing steadily toward the surface, feeding the pressure trapped within the peak. The numbers climb, then surge, and the scientists watch with mounting dread as the mountain breathes out its poisonous warning. Then, without warning, the gases suddenly plunge, and the scientists must ask whether the vent has sealed or simply choked. A sealed vent is the more frightening answer, for it means pressure building with nowhere to go but a sudden, violent release. Each reading forces an agonizing judgment, a weighing of lives against uncertainty that no instrument can ever fully resolve. With this hard-won knowledge, the scientists design a scale of alert levels running from 1 to 5 to guide the evacuations. They draw a danger zone around the volcano, a careful boundary meant to keep families beyond the reach of the deadliest flows. Each level carries a clear meaning, a signal to prepare, to move, or to flee, so that no warning is ever lost in confusion. But drawing lines upon a map proves far easier than convincing thousands of people to abandon the only homes they have ever known. Many who live near Pinatubo have never once seen an eruption, and the very idea of fleeing feels distant and unreal to them. To bridge this gap of understanding, the team shows films of past disasters, letting distant tragedies speak where words fail. Communities watch in silence as the screen reveals what molten rock and burning ash can do to towns, much like their own homes. Slowly, understanding begins to spread through the villages, and quiet fear gives shape to the fragile possibility of survival. Elders and officials carry the message from house to house, urging their neighbors to prepare for a danger they cannot yet see. The Eta, closest of all to the summit, listen to the mountain's changing voice and begin to move down from the higher slopes. Word travels along footpaths and radio waves alike, reaching farmers, soldiers, and townsfolk in a widening ring of warning. For the first time, a whole region begins to look upon its beloved mountain not as a guardian, but as a gathering danger. Yet the mountain, as if sensing the many watching eyes upon it, grows strangely quiet, and its warning signs begin to fade. The tremors soften, the escaping gases fall away, and doubt begins to creep into the minds of those who sounded the alarm. A false alarm could shatter credibility, upend thousands of lives, and drain the treasury of a region already deeply strained. Some begin to wonder whether the danger has passed, whether the mountain has merely grumbled and settled back into its slumber. Pressure mounts from every side, from officials, from business, from weary families longing to return to the homes they left. Yet history offers a grave and sobering warning, carried in the memory of a mountain half a world away, in the Andes of Colombia. In 1985, the eruption of Nevado del Ruiz unleashes torrents of mud that claim more than 20,000 lives in a single night. That tragedy struck because the warnings went unheeded, and no one now dares let Pinatubo become a second lesson written in loss. So the scientists hold their ground, trusting their instruments even as the silent volcano tests their nerve and their resolve. They know that patience is its own kind of courage, and that the hardest choice is often to wait when everyone demands certainty. For days, the mountain holds its breath, and the scientists hold theirs, each waiting to see which will break the silence first. The memory of Colombia hangs over every meeting, a reminder of what silence and delay cost a distant nation years before. So they choose the harder path, to warn too soon rather than too late, and to bear the doubt of those who cannot yet see. The scientists gather again and again, weighing every reading, knowing that history will judge whichever choice they make. To call for evacuation is to gamble reputation and resources, but to stay silent is to gamble something far more precious. Then, in the first days of June, the mountain answers, and the earthquakes return with sudden and unmistakable force beneath it. The ground begins to swell as magma pushes upward, lifting the summit and straining the rock that struggles to contain it. Instruments that had fallen quiet now scream with new activity, and the scientists know the final act is drawing very near. Tilt meters record the ground bulging outward, a silent measure of the immense pressure building somewhere deep within the peak. Harmonic tremor now hums beneath the peak, the steady signature of magma flowing freely toward the surface at last. The scientists know this sound, and they know what it foretells, for it is the mountain clearing its throat before the roar. To prove the danger beyond doubt, a volcanologist flies over the crater with the general, revealing a dome of fresh lava rising. The general sees the terrible truth with his own eyes, and the argument for evacuation shifts from theory into stark urgency. On the 10th of June, the long-awaited order finally comes, and one of the great evacuations in the nation's history begins. 15,000 American service members and their families withdraw from the sprawling airbase at the mountain's very feet. Around 300,000 residents leave their villages behind, carrying what they can and trusting the words of strangers. The roads fill with families, animals, and belongings. A slow river of people flowing away from the shadow of the waking giant. Each mile they travel is a mile carried towards safety, though none can yet know how narrow the margin of survival will prove. Some go willingly, some go weeping, and some look back one last time at homes they may never live within again. The Aita descend from the highest villages, leaving behind the forests and shrines that have sheltered their people for ages. Convoys of trucks and buses carry the displaced toward shelters, schools, and open fields far beyond the drawn danger zone. In a matter of days, the greatest volcanic evacuation the nation has ever attempted empties the land around the waking peak. Farmers release their animals, shopkeepers lock their doors, and an entire way of life pauses before the coming storm. The margin is razor thin, for the greatest eruption will strike within days of the last families reaching safer ground. Behind them, the mountain gathers its final strength, and the sky above the darkened summit begins to thicken with rising ash. On the 12th of June, Pinatubo erupts for the first time in living memory, hurling a great column of ash toward the heavens. The mushroom cloud climbs more than 20 kilometers high, spreading across the sky like a dark monument to the mountain's might. Within the throat of the volcano, the plug of hardened lava is torn away, releasing the immense pressure locked deep inside. With that ancient seal at last broken, the path lies open for the far greater eruption the scientists have feared all along. For 3 long days, the mountain convulses, each blast a warning that the true and terrible climax has not yet arrived. Villages empty further, evacuation zones widen, and the last observers pull back as the ground shudders without pause or mercy. The scientists watch their screens with dread, for every reading now points toward a single, inescapable, approaching moment. Explosion follows explosion, each hurling ash higher, each stripping away another layer of the seal that held the mountain. The people who remain watch the sky darken again and again, unsure whether each blast is the last or merely a prelude. The scientists cannot say for certain when the greatest eruption will come, only that the mountain is now beyond restraint. Then comes the 15th of June, the day the world will long remember, when Pinatubo unleashes its full and terrible power. In the early afternoon, at 20 minutes before 2 o'clock, the great paroxysmal eruption begins, and there is no turning back. A column of ash and gas rockets skyward, climbing nearly 40 kilometers until it pierces the frozen edge of the stratosphere. The sky vanishes, the sun disappears, and the land below surrenders to a darkness far deeper than any ordinary starless night. Ash spreads for hundreds of kilometers, drifting across the sea and falling upon distant islands that never felt the tremors. Day becomes night across the whole region, and street lamps flicker on at noon as the ash blots out the burning sun. The very air turns thick and choking, and every living thing beneath the cloud waits in darkness for the storm to pass. The eruption lasts for hours, a sustained roar that shakes the horizon and fills the heavens with a rising tower of ash. Under its own crushing weight, the towering column collapses, sending avalanches of superheated ash down the mountain slopes. These pyroclastic flows race outward at some 200 kilometers each hour, reshaping every valley that lies within their path. Nothing living can outrun them, and the forests, fields, and villages in their way vanish beneath a searing tide of ash and stone. The land the scientists had studied for weeks is remade in minutes, its every contour rewritten by the fury of the mountain. And then, in a cruel twist of timing, a typhoon named Yuna arrives in the very same hour, colliding with the erupting mountain. Rain and winds near 200 kilometers each hour lash the region, mixing with the falling ash in a suffocating, deadly storm. The delicate instruments fail one by one, blinded by the chaos, as pumice and grit rain from the sky no human eye can pierce. two disasters become one. The fire of the earth and the fury of the sky joined into a single catastrophe over the islands. The rain turns the falling ash to a gray sludge that clings to everything, weighing down trees, wires, and every rooftop. There is no shelter from a sky that pours both water and stone, and the region endures the longest afternoon in its memory. The last remaining scientists and journalists flee for their lives, escaping through darkness as the world collapses around them. By 4 in the afternoon, the darkness becomes total, and wet ash falls as heavy as wet cement upon the rooftops of the region. Beneath the crushing weight of the sodden ash, roofs across the countryside groan, buckle, and give way one after another. Families who had stayed behind now huddle in whatever shelter remains, listening to the storm tear the familiar world apart. Lightning born of the ash cloud flickers through the blackness, and the ground shudders with each new surge from the summit. Along the swollen rivers, rain and ash combine into Lahars, terrible torrents of mud that surge down the valleys with great speed. These flows bury fields, roads, and settlements alike, sweeping away everything before them and reshaping the very land itself. For hours, the mud keeps rising, carving new channels and erasing old ones, remaking the map of the lowlands in a single day. Bridges collapse, whole neighborhoods vanish, and the rivers the people once trusted become engines of destruction overnight. The mud does not stop at the eruption's end, for years of monsoon rains will keep it flowing long after the fire has died. Communities that survive the blast must now learn to live with rivers of ash that return with every heavy season of rain. Deep within the mountain, the emptying magma chamber can no longer support the summit that once towered above the passing clouds. The peak collapses inward upon itself, and where a proud mountaintop once stood, a vast caldera opens like a wound in the earth. In a matter of hours, Pinatubo has rewritten its own geography, and the geography of everything for many miles in every direction. Where a mountain reached for the clouds that morning, by nightfall there is only a shattered rim around a smoking, silent hollow. When the ash finally begins to settle, the true scale of the tragedy grows clear, and around 850 people are lost. Many do not perish from the fire itself, but from collapsing roofs, from illness in the crowded camps, and from later Lahars. For years afterward, the rains wash loose ash into the rivers, and fresh Lahars claim still more lives and homes. The landscape lies utterly transformed, its green ridges buried beneath gray ash, its rivers choked, its valleys made strange. Whole communities return to find their villages gone, their fields entombed, and the familiar mountain reshaped beyond knowing. And yet, within this deep sorrow lies a quieter triumph, for the warnings and evacuations spared tens of thousands of lives. Had no one watched, had no one measured, and had no one dared to act, the toll would have climbed into unimaginable numbers. The true measure of the response is found not in what was destroyed, but in the countless lives carried safely out of reach. Behind every saved life stands a scientist who watched, an official who acted, and a family who chose to trust the warning. The science of prediction, tested against one of the century's greatest eruptions, proves that foresight can truly save the many. In the ruins of catastrophe stands a testament to human courage, the courage to listen, to warn, and to leave home in time. The Eta, driven from their ancestral highlands, spend years rebuilding their lives and their community upon new ground. Their resilience, like that of countless others across the plain, becomes part of the long story of recovery that follows. Slowly, the survivors clear the ash, rebuild the roads, and plant again in soil that the mountain itself made rich long ago. The recovery is slow and hard, measured not in days but in seasons, as families rebuild what the mountain took in mere hours. Yet rebuild they do, for the same rich volcanic soil that fed them before still waits beneath the ash to feed them once more. In time, green returns to the gray slopes, and life takes root again upon a mountain that nearly erased it from the land. For a decade, the Lahars return each rainy season, burying farms anew and forcing communities to move again and again. Engineers build great dikes and channels to tame the flowing mud, learning hard lessons in living beside a wounded mountain. Yet through every hardship, the people persist, replanting, rebuilding, and refusing to surrender the land they call home. But Pinatubo's reach extends far beyond the Philippines, rising into the stratosphere and slowly circling the entire planet. Some 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide spread through the upper atmosphere, veiling the whole Earth in a faint gray haze. This thin veil reflects part of the sun's light back into space, and for a time the global temperature falls by half a degree. For nearly 2 full years, the entire world lives beneath the lingering shadow of a single mountain in the Philippine highlands. Crops shift, seasons waver, and skies glow with strange sunsets, all traced back to the ash lofted high above the distant peak. Scientists study this cooling closely, learning how volcanoes shape the climate and how the wounded atmosphere heals over time. The fine aerosols circle the globe within weeks, spreading a pale ring around the planet that satellites track with wonder. For the first time, science can measure a great eruption's effect on climate with precision, from the source to the whole sky. Pinatubo becomes a natural experiment, showing how a single mountain can briefly cool a warming world from far above the clouds. Around the world, observers note brilliant sunsets in the months that follow, painted by the ash of a faraway mountain. What begins as a local catastrophe becomes, for a time, a shared experience written across every sky on distant Earth. The eruption becomes a landmark in the long history of volcanology, a hard lesson written in ash and studied for generations. The tools and methods forged in that desperate race now guard other mountains, protecting communities across the entire world. From Pinatubo, science learns to hear the warnings earlier, to read the tremors sooner, and to trust the courage to evacuate. The joint effort of Filipino and American scientists becomes a model for how nations can face such great dangers together. Their success is measured not in the lives that were lost, but in the far greater number that were quietly carried to safety. Today, the collapsed Caldera holds a quiet crater lake, its calm blue waters hiding the violence that once shook the region. Pinatubo is watched still, its every faint tremor recorded, so that its next awakening will never again arrive as a surprise. Where villages once fled in darkness, monitoring stations now stand, silent sentinels keeping their patient watch over the peak. The mountain teaches a lasting truth, that knowledge, courage, and preparation can stand between humanity and utter disaster. It reminds us that the Earth is neither cruel nor kind, but immense, and that our survival often depends on how well we listen. In an age of warming skies and restless Earth, Pinatubo reminds us that the planet can reshape our world in a single day. Its lesson endures wherever people live in the shadow of a volcano, trusting science to grant them the gift of warning. And it leaves a question for every generation to follow of whether we will heed the warnings the restless Earth still gives. The Earth holds countless such stories, each a testament to human resilience in the face of forces far beyond our control. Journey onward and discover the great transformations that have shaped our world and continue to shape it even to this day.